And there we go. Finally, I've gotten credits. These credits are moving insanely slow, though. Um, yeah, took a while. Although this expansion thing was a lot shorter than I was expecting. Um, but I guess that's what easy difficulty plus story mode will do for you. And I'm very happy that I enabled both of those because I I think I had more fun just just sweeping the floor with everything in front of me than like in these short 8 hours or what have you than I have for the rest of the game. Um, like the rest of the game, just the combats and the fights and stuff like that pale in comparison to the unkillable nature that I was in. But anyways, Baldur's Gate 2 conquered. Woot woot. For my first impressions, which were based on day 1 through 3, rough start in terms of fight difficulty. Even on normal difficulty, I'm still getting my butt kicked. Another open world type adventure is definitely not what I was hoping for, especially one as open ended as go find 20,000 gold. And for my overall thoughts, I thought the game was okay. Um, I think I mentioned earlier in this playthrough that my thoughts on this game are very much Baldur's Gate 1.5, and I still maintain those thoughts. This game, like, it feels like it picks up effectively right where Baldur's Gate 1 kind of ends. Um, me importing my character, it's it's like nothing really changed. It's just, we're all of a sudden in a new setting and whatnot. Um, I think the story, it's kind of hard to remember how the story went in the first Baldur's Gate, but I feel like the story was a little bit more focused in this one, even though there were like some open world style blunders that I feel like it kind of fell into, which is just the nature of being an open world game for the most part. Um, and I think the combat was basically the same. We just have access to more spells, which if you start off with the first game in a series and then you move on to the second game is more often than not you're gonna have the second game be the first game with just more spells and maybe some new locations and things like that. um, and I actually came to that realization several days ago, and I was just like, this game really didn't do all that much. It didn't do like many new things for the experience and whatnot. Like it was just basically a bunch of new spells. And then I realized, wait, that's basically what sequel games are. So that realization kind of caught me off guard a little bit. Let's see. For story, was it satisfying? Um, I'm gonna say no on this one, and that's mostly just in my feelings or thoughts on like what the story uh like what was happening in the story and where the story was going. We started off captured by Arenicus, and then we escape Arenicus, and then our goal is to track down Arenicus again, or not again, but like track down Arenicus so that we can get revenge. Um, and that journey of itself was kind of littered with a lot of, I'm gonna say, irrelevant things to Arenicus, and then we have the whole culmination at the end where we get to learn more about why Arenicus is doing what he's doing, and then we kill him. Um, so I think it set the stage for a really interesting villain. I just don't think that uh, I don't think the game was built to maintain the momentum that the stage was given. Weird as I guess that sounds, and that mostly just goes into, we effectively start the game where we have to gather 20,000 gold, which means that we have to go around doing a bunch of side quests and stuff like that, and that doesn't really do much. Which I'll get to in a second here. Did it feel complete? I will say it felt complete. I think this extra uh, expansion thing was kind of unnecessary, but you know, I got to become a god in the end, even though I didn't really get to see the fruits of my labors for being a god in the end. How was the pacing? So yeah, a little bit ago I was talking about how we have to gather 20,000 gold at the very beginning of the game, and let me tell you, that took a really long time. And that led into a lot of things that I'm not going to say were not relevant to the plot, but I will say just didn't really vibe well with what I was most interested in, which was continuing the main story. I think we got chucked into a lot of shenanigans. And I mean, gathering 20,000 gold seemed like a daunting task at the very start. I was very concerned. Um, and something that I don't have here, but I have later, is like there were a lot of other quests that kind of took precedence over other quests, and that that just got in the way basically. So and it's like those quests are also pretty much required. They're technically not required, but they're required. So pacing wasn't very good for me. Uh, see, thoughts on the story? I don't have much written down here. Actually, I only have one thing written down, and it's a few too many convenient storytelling to let certain plot scenes play out. So when I play Dungeons and Dragons, I want to play a game that is not railroaded. And what railroading means is that um, you're following a specific story, and at every point within that story, it will play out the same way no matter who's in the game and who's interacting with it. So in in this game, for example, if our goal is to kill Irenicus, we would hit the same major plot points every single time. We would be interacting with the same major characters every single time, and the end results of everything would always remain the same. We are being railroaded down one very specific path to do one very specific thing. Um, and those types of games, I don't necessarily like as much when I'm made painfully aware that it is railroading. Um, because it's so much more fun to engage in some of the more off the wall or side activities that are directly related to the main story, but don't necessarily follow the railroad tracks. Um, and so, for example, in one of my campaigns that I ran, my players were like, you know what would be great? Let's teleport to this town that's literally on the other side of the world. And, let's hang out there for a session or two. And like that derailed everything that I had planned. But I went along with it. And, we had great moments and times to spawn out of that. And I realized, this is a video game. You can't really do that. But this all wraps back around to the choices and like the dialogue choices and the choices to move forward with how the story plays out. They're all like three very specific things of like, I'm super evil, I'm a little sassy, and I'm lawful good, effectively. And there's not much room for in betweens, I guess. Where's my little chaotic neutral? Like, you know what? Why don't I help you out, Arenicus? Like, why don't we team up? Why do we have to be in opposition to each other? Why can't I team up with the ball spawn? Can I uncover Melisandre? Her name is not Melisandre, whatever her name is, her plot beforehand and stop her and team up with the five ball spawn to kill her, and then the five ball spawn, maybe then start attacking each other or whatever. Um, at the end there, I think is the a perfect example of why couldn't I just resurrect Ball? I think that would have been a like I would have went with that option. That would have been interesting. So yeah, I think I think in a nutshell, it just comes down to the railroading aspect. But there are also just some instances of just like, okay, you really went out of your way to make sure that I'm going to do this one specific thing and this one specific interaction is going to happen no matter what. For gameplay mechanics and design, what gameplay elements stand out? I didn't encounter a tutorial for this game, which I thought was very, very odd. Um, I'm guessing it's because I imported a character, but I feel like I needed the tutorial because I don't remember a lot of things. Is this are these credits just looping? I don't know. Party member quests are pretty obnoxious. You have to stop everything you're doing and go do them, or else they leave your party. This. So I mentioned that earlier that there were quests that were technically not required, but they're basically required, and it's party member quests. Um, I obviously there's no more Baldur's Gate games of this style anymore. But if they were going to go into a Baldur's Gate 3, a year or two later, um, re reworking how companion quests work would be my biggest ask because I don't want to recruit a bunch of companions and then go off to go do my quest. And then while I'm in the middle of a mission or a quest or whatever, they're like, you know what? Actually, I have this thing that I need to go do. And if you're not going to go do this immediately right this second, then, our relationship is done. And I think I had this happen in Baldur's Gate 1, in fact, where I was literally in the dungeon for their quest and they're like, you know what, you're not helping me out, I'm mad. And I'm just like, what are you doing? We're literally in the dungeon that you want us to be in. So They if I had a choice, that would be the number one thing that I would want to see changed drastically. Driz taking the equipment I looted from him and his dead party members makes me so sad. I worked hard to kill the sucker. Yeah, I that was disappointing. It was very disappointing. For combat, um, I I I don't think I have anything really negative to say about the combat. I think I like how the combat plays out. There's some little quirks that I run into that aren't so nice. Um, Clicking things is sometimes a little bit difficult. Sometimes characters do things. I think if you start casting a spell and then you move that character, you lose that spell. Um, and obviously this is based off of Dungeons and Dragons rules and things like that, but a few extra quality of life things um, would go a long way. If there were to be a quote unquote third Baldur's Gate game for this era. Dungeons. I don't think I had really anything negative to say about the dungeons. I will say that the Underdark area was both cool and insanely obnoxious at the same time. But I'll let it rock. It was mostly that Beholder cave, and also the Mind Flayers. The Mind Flayers just like, you know what? I'm just gonna eat your brains on my second attack. It was rough times. For Cardinal Sins, removing a key party member without sufficient replacement. Side quests are required to progress the main story. Game over if a party member or guest character dies. Oh, that's main character. And main story missions are side quests. For miscellaneous sound and music, music, I enjoyed a couple of tracks. I don't remember a whole lot. I feel like this game probably has like 15 or less music tracks on it or something like that. But despite it being a very orchestra-y sound, um, you know, I I liked what I heard for the most part. For voice acting, I thought the voice acting was fine. There were some instances of things feeling very like out of context in the way that they were spoken. Like sometimes you'll say a line and then let's say you say a line and you're happy, and then the next line you say is like agitated or something like that. And there would be some instances where stuff like that would happen, but it's a very minor thing. For graphics, I like the look of the game. I do think that there's some instances where you're in cutscenes and like a spell effect will kill somebody and then dialogue will happen right afterwards, and then you're stuck hearing the spell sound effect all over again. Most likely a bug, but it could just be a pause, like a dialogue pause issue or something. Who knows? If it's a sequel, does it achieve more of the same? Yes. Is the game worth recommending? This is one of those weird things. Let's keep it a buck. Who wants to play Baldur's Gate 2 in 2025? For the first time. Who wants to go play Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 for the very first time in 2025? That's one of those interesting pieces of knowledge there that is kind of required, because this is a super old game that has super old methodologies, and even the systems in which this game um, is like built upon, which is I think advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Like these are old systems. Even if you got into Dungeons and Dragons to nowadays, you would be playing 5th edition, which is insanely different from advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And so there's an insane learning curve to playing something like this. Um, and so I think you would probably have to be one of those people that kind of grew up in this era and has some familiarity with how these games kind of play. Um, or you have already played some of the games that are like it and can kind of make the jump from one era to the other. So like well, I guess I there are some games that I've played that kind of play like this one but don't, and I think those are the scenarios where I'd be like, "Oh, you played that game, then you can probably find something to enjoy about Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 in this day and age without having to go about it and whatnot." So yeah. It's a tough undertaking in 2025. I do think so. I it like I'm trying to think of super old games out there, but there's some super old games out there where it's just like, in what universe would you recommend this super old game to somebody to play in today's age when they have gotten accustomed to how games are made and progressed through in the 2025 era? It's a super tough undertaking. I did, you think? Yeah, I did, but I also, I grew up, uh or like I was around during the Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 times, and I've also played games that are have similarities to it. I played 3rd edition and 3.5 and 4th edition and 5th edition, so I I have a familiarity with even some of the older rules. My mom played Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, so like I've had some interactions with that as well. Probably only people that played Baldur's Gate 3, and you say super old methodologies, which is just D&D, which is exactly what Baldur's Gate 3 is, and that was game of the year, even with D&D rules. Yeah, but I mean, I haven't played Baldur's Gate 3, so I don't know. But from what I've seen of Baldur's Gate 3, it's Divinity Original Sin 3 effectively. Just in a Dungeons and Dragons world with a Dungeons and Dragons framework. And I think that that may not necessarily carry over as much as I me personally, I if I played Baldur's Gate 3 first, I don't think I would go back and play Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. Um because the gap in just time is so massive, but also they're going to be completely different games. It's it's like playing Final Fantasy 1 and then playing Final Fantasy 16 and then saying, "You know what? I'm going to go play Final Fantasy 1." It's they're completely different games. Like they might as well not even be in the same franchise at that point. So, yeah. Well, their 5th edition is crap. Even Larian complained about it. I Let's just say that I'm not a fan of 5th edition either. I don't like what they did to feats, and That's a big part of my problems with it. But anyways, to get the end of this thoughts, because today is Taco Tuesday, and I need to go get my tacos. If the developer is watching, well, I think this game set out to do what it needed to do. Baldur's Gate 1.5 to me is a good thing. Um, I always say, does the sequel provide more of the same? And that's exactly what this game set out to do. Um, and I think really the trappings and the things that I didn't necessarily enjoy about this game primarily stem from open world methodologies and philosophies and things like that. And like I, it's not that I don't enjoy open world games. It's that they all typically have the same problems. And I think this game just has the unfortunate part of it of it's an older game with older methodologies, and on top of that it also has the open world aspect to it that brings its own set of problems. And so that's probably why I think it ends up just being okay for me. um, if it was a more focused and I say, more focused when earlier I was complaining that it was too railroady for me, which, is very funny. But if it was more focused and, maybe I just choose my party at the very start of the game and then you just, railroad me the entire way without me having to do like certain things like gathering 20,000 gold for random side quests and things like that. And every step of the way was getting closer to um, the main story and things like that. I think I would probably have been more into it than I was. But yeah, overall, did what you set out to do. So well done. And do I want a sequel? Well, there is already a sequel. It's not a like a sequel to this though. And so I guess if let's just say, they came out with a Baldur's Gate the return of Ball or something like that, and it was exactly in this style. Would I want that game? Would I want to play that game? I would probably have some curiosity. Uh, like I wouldn't outright reject it. Is probably the best way that I could put it. There would be some interest there, but we'll see. Let me catch up on chat real quick, and then I can speed run to my tacos. Thank you for the GGs. Baldur's Gate 3 gameplay is just Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, but prettier. And that was super popular. Really? I I I haven't played Baldur's Gate 3, so I can't say, but I have played Divinity Original Sin 2, and if it's anything like Divinity Original Sin 2, I think the gap between Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 and Divinity Original Sin 2 are huge. Story of Baldur's Gate 2 is just well written and makes your choice matters. Uh I I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. Uh, Under what circumstances did I get to make a choice where it affected something like it changed the way one of the problems is I can only think about this expansion that I just did, and I'm already starting to forget the story of the main game. So I don't know. Uh, Baldur's Gate 3 is fantastic tabletop simulator, just a different game. Gotcha. Disagree that they are very different. Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 felt like streamlined version of commands, not adrenaline fueled to you. I can get that. I can get that. All right. That's thrown a ball. Completed. I'm gonna add the points after I get back from my tacos. I gotta handle that. So thanks for watching. Appreciate it. I'll be back tomorrow, 7 a.m. Pacific time, to play something new. What will that be? The world may never know. But yeah, thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Yeah, the next time I see you. Peace.